Okay, so I'm not here to talk about the executive order that Trump signed. I'm here to talk about political optics. And if you do not know what a political optic is, if you look it up in a dictionary, this would be right next to it. Because just look at the framing of this picture. How he has these little girls around him, young women around him, and like the eagerness on their faces, the innocence on their faces. And it's so sad because this man really does not care about these young ladies, but it's the optic and it's the opportunity for him to show, I guess, a softer side to him.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So it's official. The NCAA have changed their inclusion policy after bowing to pressure, after realizing, I hope, how ridiculous they looked as an organization for allowing this to go on for as long as it did. I'm curious to see the outcome of these various court cases that they are involved in. Perhaps now they'll be settled, but they need to acknowledge that their policy was trash. So President Trump said this on Truth Social. Exciting news due to my executive order, which I proudly signed yesterday. The NCAA has officially changed their policy of allowing men in women's sports. It is now banned. This is a great day for women and girls across our country. Men should have never been allowed to compete against women in the first place. But I am proud to be the president to save women's sports. We expect the Olympics Committee to also use common sense and implement this policy, which is very popular among the American people and the entire world. So it remains to be seen what the Olympic Committee do, but I'm so glad to hear that athletes who want to come here to compete in the upcoming Olympics better come with the correct sex marker on their passport. If you're a man and you're trying to come here to compete in the women's category, you will not be granted a visa. But finally, America has got back some credibility on the world stage. America is back to being the leader of the free world. So I am inclined to believe the Olympic Committee will eventually change their stupid policy as well. Riley Gaines. Now this brought a tear to my eye, to be honest, when she wrote this. She said, "I wish I could have told the girl in this photo what was to come in 2025. She felt cheated, betrayed and violated. I'm just glad that girl trusted God and took a leap of faith by stating the obvious when it wasn't popular. It was then, and it's true now. He's a man." As ridiculous as it was, if you remember a time you weren't even allowed to say that, you weren't even allowed to acknowledge that.
My name is Leah Thomas. I'm a transgender woman, a former college swimmer, and the first trans athlete to be named Division I NCAA champion. I started swimming when I was 5 years old, and it has taught me so much.
They lied to us, they gaslit us, they told us we were bigots, they told us that we were trying to ban people from sports. No, the NCAA have now acknowledged that everybody needs to compete in the correct category. So the NCAA said, "We strongly believe that clear, consistent and uniform eligibility standards would best serve today's student athletes instead of a paperwork of conflicting state laws and court decisions." To that end, President Trump's order provides a clear and national standard. No kidding. So you must be assigned female at birth in order to compete in the women's division.
In swift action, the NCAA changed its transgender student-athlete participation policy following President Donald Trump's executive order banning transgender athletes from women and girls sports. The NCAA's policy change is effective immediately and applies to all athletes, regardless of previous eligibility reviews. About 1,100 member schools are part of the NCAA, with more than 500,000 athletes, making it the largest governing body for college sports in the U.S. The president's executive order allows federal agencies to withhold federal funding from entities that do not abide by Title IX as the Trump administration sees it. That sex is the gender someone was assigned at birth. Until now, the NCAA's policy, which took effect in 2022, had a sport-by-sport approach. The new executive order stipulates the Trump administration will work with sports governing bodies, including the International Olympic Committee, to ensure his guidance is followed in non-educational settings as well. The IOC has allowed transgender athletes to participate at the Olympics since 2004, but it wasn't until 2021 that the first openly transgender athletes competed in the Summer Games.
And we know that the UN report said that up to 900 medals had been taken from female athletes throughout the years by male athletes masquerading as women. That could have been male athletes with disorder of sexual development, like Imran Khalif. That could have been transgender male athletes who weren't open about it because the Olympic Committee got rid of the gender testing in the 90s. I don't even like the term assigned at birth. What does that even mean? It should simply say that you must be female in order to compete. And if there is any discrepancies, you'll be subject to gender testing, which is a quick cheek swab, by the way. So the founder of XXXY Clothing, she pointed out that no high-level female athlete has spoken out in defense of women's sports. And I believe she was referring to athletes who are currently competing, who are currently, at the forefront of their careers. Because we know Sharon Davies has spoken out, April Hutchinson over in Canada, who got suspended for 2 years for speaking out, dealing with it firsthand, what we're talking about. And Martina Navratilova, she's been at the forefront of this for the longest time. She is a Democrat. She endorsed Kamala Harris. She votes Democrat. But after Trump signed his executive order, she had this to say: "I hate that the Democrats totally failed women and girls on this very clear issue of women's sports being for females only." She despises Trump. So, that was the best you're going to get out of her. Instead, we had athletes such as Megan Rapinoe, who was on the verge of retirement, speaking out in defense of men who want to compete in the women's category. It was ridiculous. There was the letter that they signed, a bunch of female athletes, WNBA players, even swimmers, who signed that letter in support of trans athletes competing in women's categories. And it's as clear as day that such people are on the wrong side of history. They're on the wrong side of history for a number of issues. Payton McNabb, as we know, was injured very seriously, still dealing with injuries today as a result of playing against a team with a male athlete. She said, "I am very thankful the NCAA is finally standing with women, something they should have wanted to do from the start. This is a long overdue step in the right direction, but there's still plenty more work to do. When will Mr. Thomas have to return his trophy?" And as you can imagine, people are now calling for the NCAA to go a step further, because championships were taken from female athletes. People are calling on the transgender athletes to be stripped of their titles, to be stripped of their medals, stripped of their records, for those records to be corrected. The new policy limits competition in women's sports to student athletes assigned female at birth only. The policy permits student athletes assigned male at birth to practice with women's teams and receive benefits such as medical care while practicing. This policy is effective immediately and applies to all student athletes, regardless of previous eligibility reviews under the NCAA's prior transgender participation policy. So people are a bit concerned about the all other benefits line in this policy change. What does that mean? The NCAA perhaps needs to clarify that. Some people are suggesting it means that transgender athletes can not only practice with female athletes, but go into the locker room with female athletes. I hope not, but that definitely needs to be clarified. Hey, NCAA, what exactly do you mean by this? Receive all other benefits. The founder of XXXY Athletics, who is a former gymnast, she said, "Some clarity would be good at NCAA. What does this mean? Even practicing with female athletes. Why?" Seriously, we know that even in practice, it can be a concern for female athletes. The women of SJSU, they were in fear for their safety even during practice. Melissa Beatty-Smoos said that she saw female athletes in fear when their teammate would spike the ball during practice.
There's many times for multiple people all the time that we're having to try and dodge the balls that are coming straight at our face. And I've been hit multiple times by the balls, and I've had bruising on my legs just from trying to dodge it, and it catches my thigh, and I've had a bruise on my thigh for weeks.
So even during practice, it can be an issue, especially when it comes to sports such as volleyball, sports that involve close contact. Riley Gaines said, the NCAA has officially changed their transgender participation policy effective immediately. I can't even begin to tell you how vindicating it feels, knowing that no girl will ever have to experience what my teammates and I did. Thank God Trump is back in office. So this is obviously a huge step. Even if these executive orders are challenged, because people are saying they're going to be challenged, we're still hoping that the Girls and Women in Sports Act will pass through the Senate too. So there's still a long way to go. But when it comes to the NCAA, they're a huge sporting body. This all started with them in the first place because they allowed Leah Thomas to participate in the women's division. So we're not going to see that anymore. We're not going to see the likes of Leah Thomas, Blair Fleming and Sadie Schreiner. So Sadie posted this letter from Jack Turban, who quit his role after the NCAA changed their policy. He said, I'm writing to resign from the NCAA Committee on Competitive Safeguards and Medical Aspects of Sports, effective immediately. Unfortunately, your recent decision to issue a blanket ban on trans female participation in women's sports does not align with medical or scientific consensus. I cannot in good conscience participate in this kind of politicization of science and medicine at the expense of some of our most vulnerable student athletes. And then he goes on to say, I'm immensely grateful for my time with CSMAS and have been consistently impressed by the academic and medical rigor the committee brings to ensuring competitive fairness and the safety of student athletes. You've got to be kidding me. It was actually bringing gender ideology, this cult, into our sports. That was actually the politicization. And thankfully, sanity has been restored. Science has been restored and will no longer be politicized in this area.
Only 18% of the country says that they should be, in fact, allowed to participate in women's sports. Compare this to the opposition. I mean, my goodness gracious, 79%. You rarely get 79% of the country to agree on anything, but they do, in fact, agree on the idea of opposing transgender female athletes in women's sports. But it's not just the here and now, Laura. It's not just the here and now. What we're actually seeing is a trend on this particular issue, and it's going in the direction of opposition. So take a look here. Okay, transgendered female athletes, and amongst those Americans who oppose them in women's sports. Back in 2021, it was 62%. A majority, but, not anywhere close to a ginormous majority, right? A clear majority, but not a ginormous majority. But then again, you look here in 2025, you see it at 79%. So it's not just that the majority of Americans are opposed to transgender female athletes in women's sports. It's that the opposition has become considerably larger in just the last 4 years.
Wow, and this is CNN. And the fact is, the Democrats lost people because they went so far left, they were out of touch with reality. And people who don't like that, people who actually want to live in the real world and who are affected by real world issues, they couldn't get on board with that. So yeah, they lost a significant amount of people. As RFK Jr. said, they left me, something like that. He said the Democratic Party left him a long time ago. And it appears that they are doubling down on their insanity. We see what's going on at the moment with their protesting government efficiency. Apparently that's offensive to them. Making sure that our tax dollars are not being squandered. For women's locker rooms to be female only. For men to not be allowed in there, exposing themselves to girls. That appears to be offensive to these Democrats. There's no wonder they lost a lot of people.
How does this break down across party lines?
Yeah, so, when you get 79% of Americans to agree on anything, in this case, opposition to transgender female athletes in women's sports, you got to believe that it's the majority across all parties. And that's, in fact, what we see. So transgender female athletes, again, opposing them in women's sports. You get 67% of Democrats, so 2/3 there. You get 64% of independents, so you get about 2/3 there. And then look at this, near uniformity among Republicans, 94% of Republicans in opposition. You rarely get 67% of Democrats and 94% of Republicans to agree on anything, but they do on this particular issue. But it's not just that Republicans are in opposition, it's the strength of that opposition. Okay, Republicans who strongly want to ban transgender female athletes from women's sports, get this, it's 84% who strongly want to ban them. And that is actually larger than the amount of Republicans who strongly want to deport all immigrants in America who are here illegally. So that just gives you an understanding of how strong the opposition is among Republicans. It is really strong when it comes to banning transgender female athletes from women's sports, Laura.
Yesterday, I saw two video clips that really struck me. I kept seeing them over and over again. One of the clips was of President Trump in the Oval Office surrounded by dozens of young girls, athletes, as he signed an executive order protecting women and girls in sports by keeping transgender women from competing in those sports. However you feel about the LGBT community, you have got to accept at this point that there is an advantage that comes with being biological male competing in female sports. It just gave very much grandpa energy. He signed that executive order. He wanted to make sure that his signature was perfect. He handed out pens. He gave hugs and shook hands. Like, that's what was going on in the Oval Office with the President of the United States. Then I see a clip of these damn Democrats angry, screaming their follicles out of their head, cussing and fussing about fighting in the streets and about going to war. And I mean, like, and just gaslighting the American people is absolutely unhealthy. They have to have high blood pressure. Then you have the elders of the Democrat Party barely hanging on, trying their best to come up with a chant, a war cry. They failed tremendously. And it's like, come on, like, y'all are gaslighting the American people. You want the American people to be up in arms. You want the American people to be unhealthy. These same Democrats that were in charge for the last 4 years, these same Democrats that were in charge for the last 12 of 16 years.
What it comes down to is that people don't like to see young girls put in a position where they're subject to abuse. That's what this comes down to. It's not even just about sports. It's about safety. I don't see how anybody can be offended by that image of Trump surrounded by young female athletes, including little girls in elementary school, as he signs an executive order to ensure their protection at school, at college, to ensure that they can participate in sports safely and fairly. If you're offended at that, I can't help you. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.